Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 18, Mystic Cosmogony, from Some Mystical Adventures by G.R.S. Mead. Chapter 18, Mystic Cosmogony. Cosmogony, we are told in one of our most recent books of reference, is a theory concerning the origin, begetting of the world. The mythological or anti-scientific view is preserved in the traditions, oral or written, and the folk poetry of primitive and ancient peoples. Dr. Emil G. Hirsch, Cosmogony, the Jewish Encyclopedia. We are further informed by the same authority that the original cosmogonies are spontaneous productions of folk fancy and are therefore unsystematic, forming as a rule only a chapter in the theogonies and genealogies of the gods. Systematization is a sign that primitive notions have been subjected to treatment in the interest of a certain theology or advanced religious consciousness. Nevertheless, even when systematized, cosmogonies, being anti-scientific, are outside the pale of serious consideration as a contribution to any genuine knowledge of the world process. They are of value solely as material in which to trace the history of the evolution of fancy. Prior to the birth of the first-hand study of nature by the scientific method, this judgment now applies not only to the cosmogonies of all ancient and primitive peoples, but also to those creation accounts in the Jewish Bible, which were held by Jew and Christian for so many centuries to be the immediate and inerrant revelation of divine knowledge. Thus, Professor Hirsch tells us that the cosmogony, or to be more exact, the cosmogonies of the Bible, must be viewed and analyzed according to the light derived from comparison with similar conceits among non-Hebrews. Notice the term similar conceits, and also that Dr. Hirsch is a rabbi as well as professor of rabbinical literature and philosophy at the University of Chicago. In another recent book of reference of high repute, the present position is laid down even more strictly. It may be regarded as an axiom of modern study that the descriptions of creation contained in the biblical records are permanently valuable only insofar as they express certain religious truths which are still recognized as such. To seek for even a kernel of historical fact in such cosmogonies is inconsistent with a scientific point of view. We can no longer state the critical problem thus. How can the biblical cosmogony be reconciled with the results of natural science? The question to be answered is rather this: from what source have the cosmogonic ideas expressed in the Old Testament been derived? Zimmern, Creation, Encyclopedia Biblica. This may be thought by some to be an extreme position, but the reasonable conservatives who call themselves moderates do but confirm it. Biblical apologetic is proceeding on false lines when it seeks to constrain the biblical narrative into harmony with the results of modern science. Reverend Owen C. Whitehouse, Cosmogony, Hastings Dictionary of the Bible. If then the biblical accounts of cosmogony, on which so much labor and ingenuity have been expended by scholars of all schools, conservative, moderate, liberal and revolutionary, cannot be reconciled with the results of modern science, it goes without saying that no other cosmogony stands the slightest chance of a hearing before the bar of modern culture. But in spite of this, may not the mystics still venture to inquire whether, after all, the mythological way of representation may not foreshadow a reality underlying the facts which the scientific method boasts itself to be discovering for the first time? Speaking generally and postulating that we have now only the debris of the past by which to judge, we would have the hardihood still to believe that mythologic cosmogony did adumbrate certain vital facts of the world process, whereas modern science, for all her tireless searching and her analysis of the appearances of nature, has to confess that life forever escapes her. Cosmogony follows on theogony. The world fashioning has its genesis in the vital energies of the divine mind. Antiquity conceived these vital energies as intelligences and personified them. The latter term is generally used in this connection as an indication of the fanciful nature of the ancient mind. Antiquity dreamed the gods into existence. They are the baseless fabric of its childish fantasy. And yet those who thus speak, who are ever ready to point out what they consider to be the foolishness of days gone by, are frequently the same minds who elaborate a subtle theory concerning the person of the deity, and insist upon it that it is precisely this personality that is the most divine element in the God of their love. May it not, then, be that it is precisely the same instinct in man that is expressing itself in both instances? That in the root notion, the living idea which lies hid behind the word person, behind the mask, there is a profound truth, and that without this creative power of imagination, the power of clothing oneself in the image of oneself, there would be no world of manifestation at all. At any rate, this is how some of the great cosmogonies have set forth the beginnings of things. The divine first clothes himself in the image of himself. So also with man, he first clothes the gods in the image of his own innermost nature. He personifies them as modes of his own greater consciousness. All this was native to him when he still felt himself kin with nature, when he felt rather than thought, when he followed instinct rather than ratiocination. But for long centuries, this feeling of kinship with nature has been gradually weakened by the powerful play of that form of mind peculiar to man, until he has at last reached a stage when he finds himself largely divorced from nature. To such an extent, indeed, that he treats her as something foreign and apart from himself. He has now developed the power of self-separation to a very remarkable degree, to such a stage indeed that he can no longer in any way feel with the feelings of the men of antiquity. His forebears have become complete strangers to him, almost as difficult for him to understand as the animals. He seems at present, at any rate in the persons of most of the accredited thinkers of the West, to be absolutely convinced that no other mode of mind can exist except his own mode. That mind is of many modes, that all modes are native to the great mind, that man has in him the promise and potency of all these modes, he will not believe. To say that nature thinks, he regards as an entire misuse of language, mere metaphor and poetic rhapsody of absolutely no scientific value. That nature has feelings even, he will not allow. To speak of love and hate among the elements is for him a puerile fancy the cultured mind has long outgrown. The sole joy of such a mind would almost seem to be the delight of expelling the life from all forms and dissecting their dead bodies. Far otherwise was it with the men of antiquity. They felt more widely and more deeply, in greater waves of emotion, and so they imagined more freely and more fluidly. They were, in brief, more on the life side of things than on the form side. The marvelous microscopic mind of minute detail had not yet been evolved. Perhaps we may be allowed to call these phases the fluid and the crystal age respectively. That the methods employed for the instruction of mankind in these two ages should be very different calls for no surprise. Indeed, it is just what we should expect. The chief requisite of the earlier age was that its feelings and its fancies should be given full scope and satisfaction. The people were vastly more natural than they are today, and therefore far more psychic, though in a fluid and indefinite matter. The present age, on the contrary, seeks satisfaction in such matters for its mind alone. It no longer seeks life, but light. Its one aim is so to polish the facets of its mind that they shall reflect the light with ever greater brilliance. It therefore excludes all feeling and emotion, which are of a watery nature, as the deadliest foes of science, and hence its antagonism to religion, which largely preserves the old way of instruction, and in so doing appeals to what, in most cases, is a deeper and more elemental side of man's nature than his comparatively lately evolved reason, to something far more ancient in him than the new mode of mind he has been so busily creating for himself, and which now, by its adamantine hardness and its clear-cut facets, reflects so brilliant a light that he is dazzled into thinking this reflected light cast on external objects is far more precious than the deep life that is within him and penetrates to his inmost being. Strange as it may appear to the modern mind, whose one ambition is to harden and formalize itself so that it may reflect the light with ever greater brilliance, the ancient mind conceived of knowledge in a totally different fashion. It did not crystallize itself into a hardened point, but remaining fluid, knew that the mode of knowledge suitable to its nature was by intercourse and blending. Its experience was, according to the universal teaching of the past, that it could blend with intelligences greater than itself, that it could have intercourse with the gods. This, in most general terms, and as applied to the greater minds of antiquity, is the ground of experience on which all genuine mythological recitals are based. But here we must distinguish the myths based on genuine experience of this nature from the faulty copies of the originals which were put into circulation by those who had no immediate experience of their own, and which in course of time, owing to the imperfect nature of the means of transmission, almost entirely lost their original lineaments. The myths preserved by the initiates of antiquity differed widely from the myths in circulation among the people. Very few of the former have come down to us, and even these few in greatly disfigured form. The folk myths and folk tales, however, abound, and from them modern scholarship pronounces its judgment on the whole. In this adventure we are paying attention only to the method of genuine mythology as based on experience. The history of the utilization of the original material in the interests of national or priestly pretensions, though of the greatest interest, may be passed over. The root idea was that man is not separate from the universe, and that in considering the begetting of the universe, man is in reality considering his own greater begetting. But more than this, the story, though set forth in terms of time, is in reality an eternal history. It is always going on, and the only way of truly understanding it is by experiencing it. As is now well known to many, the end at which the genuine mystic aimed was to bring to birth his own true cosmic body, and thus to become a god. In other words, the regeneration of himself required that he should first experience all the stages of cosmogenesis in his own nature. Just as in mythological science there were the successive stages of theogony, cosmogony, and anthropogenesis, so in the ascending scale of the return there was a cosmogenesis and a theogenesis. Today we hear much of the birth of cosmic consciousness. But it is nothing new. It is the old secret. For cosmic consciousness, for contact with the great soul of things, man must first develop in himself a cosmic organism, and so gradually bring himself to birth as man-God, being made kin with the great mind. This is the innermost secret adumbrated in the greater mysteries of antiquity. Countless terms may be used, innumerable details may be elaborated, but it is always one and the same mystery that is veiled and revealed. There is a coming forth, a turn, and a return. The coming forth is in ignorance, the return in knowledge, that is, in vital experience. Seeing that this ascent is a continual giving birth to one's greater self, the ground experience on the way of return is always of the nature of an orderly development, our cosmogenesis. Thus, for the spiritually initiated of antiquity, the myths of world genesis did not simply tell the story of the birth of a universe external to himself, but rather revealed the mode in which his own universe was generated within himself. It was because of their ignorance of this great truth of spiritual initiation that we find the following rebuke to his disciples put in the mouth of the Master in a Christian Gnostic gospel. How long shall I bear with you? How long shall I suffer you? Do ye still not know, and are ye ignorant? Know ye not, and do ye not understand that ye are all angels, all archangels, gods and lords, all rulers, all the great invisibles, all those of the midst, those of every region of them that are on the right, all the great ones of the emanations of the light with all their glory, that ye are all of yourselves, and in yourselves in turn, from one mass and one matter and one substance. Pistia Sophia 247 and 248. To most of us, shut off as we are from the depth of our being by an impermeable surround of false opinion and unhealthy habits of life and thought which are so powerful that they have now become not only our second but our first nature. Such echoes of the ancient mystery teaching appear to be the fevered dreams of an enthusiastic imagination that vanish in the clear day of scientific fact. But there are a few who, either owing to a certain divine grace or, what is the same thing, the restoration of a certain memory deeper far than the impressions of our physical consciousness, recognize in these echoes the sound of a voice that utters words of highest truth and deepest wisdom. To such, these words are words of power which open up vistas of a vision so glorious that they yearn with all their souls to burst the bonds of the prison of habit of thought and life in which they now feel themselves enchained. For the heart in them cries out as the disciples in the Gnostic Gospel. When, therefore, the Saviour had said these words, the disciples came forward and cried out all together, saying, O Saviour, thou excitest us with exceeding great frenzy because of the transcendent height which thou hast revealed unto us. And thou exaltest our souls, and they have become paths on which we travel to come unto thee, for they came forth from thee. Now therefore, because of the transcendent heights which thou hast revealed unto us, our souls have become frenzied, and they travail mightily, yearning to go forth from us into the height, to the region of thy kingdom. Pistis Sophia, 279 and 280. This is the divine frenzy, the divine love passion of the soul, the stirring within the depths of the ocean of our being that shall in time bring forth the perfection, all in all, out of all powers composed. Cosmogony, thus conceived, becomes of vital and immediate interest. It is no longer a question of correspondence and analogy, simply as when we say, even as man develops from the germ cell, so does the universe come forth from the cosmic egg. It is the intuition of a far more intimate reality. The mystic of this way dares to declare that in very truth, in his actual body, worlds and world systems are at every moment coming into and passing out of existence. That the infinitely small and the infinitely great are in actuality not really distinguished by size or length of days, but that the within and the without in themselves match and mingle eternally. Let him but actualize himself, and the carapace of selfhood, the limit that now presses on him, will be dissolved, and within and without will blend in the perfect union of self-realization. Now the whole tendency of modern thought and modern life is to make that limit ever more and more rigid. It is therefore of the greatest importance to shake off this tyranny. But in order to do so, we must first realize that it exists. If we do not feel it as limitation and constriction, we cannot even begin to shake ourselves free. But if we do feel it, we should bestir ourselves by every means in our power to free ourselves from the mire of present opinion and to slip off the habits of the things to which we have grown used. And one of the most useful means that lies ready to hand is joyfully to bathe ourselves in the vital waters of the best sources we possess, and deeply to breathe in the atmosphere of the highest inspiration that has been vouchsafed to us. Mystic cosmogony is thus a subject of the greatest interest and importance, for we are compelled at every moment to be overstepping the borderland of the present state of scientific observation and hypothesis, and to enter a domain of thought and experience that is of a truly cosmic nature, in comparison with our present human limitations. But many of us have not the mental equipment suited to this study and cry out, "This thing is too hard for me." It is quite true that, on one side, the study of cosmogony calls for the greatest intellectual acumen and a wide knowledge of all that modern science can teach us. But there is another side. Intellectual knowledge is one thing, but vital gnosis is another. Cosmogony can be made the subject of contemplation. Let the lover of these things once realize that the hidden nature of cosmogony is, as we have described, and a new way of approach begins gradually to present itself. The mind, as we have said, is not only of one mode, it is not only of the nature of human formal intellect, as that term is generally understood, but also of the nature of intelligence, of those deeper instincts that feel after greater things rather than endeavor to compel these to accommodate themselves to the configuration of our present mind forms. This intelligence is the feminine, fluid, and vital mode of mind, and in itself it is formless and therefore able to receive and conceive living ideas, incurious of successions in time and processions in space. Mystic cosmogony not only may be taken as speaking about cosmic things, but it can also be treated from the point of view of union. It can be taken as teaching about the happenings within the substance of man at the moment prior to becoming cosmic, the beginning of the Christ birth, after the Immaculate Conception. For just as the worlds have periods of being built and being unbuilt, so in man's substance and nature is there an unbuilding and a building at all great moments. In normal birth, there is in the mother body a cessation of activity in certain directions for certain periods before the birth of an offspring. So also in the genesis of cosmic consciousness is there a cessation of periodicity in the mother substance of the man, prior to the birth of that greater consciousness which heralds the birth of true unity. There is a change of direction in man's innermost substance. The birth of universal awareness, the consciousness of wholes, must be the birth of a world. Every mind has its own direction, every person has his scope of vision or awareness. And when anyone attains to a consciousness of the whole, he does bring to birth, in a sense, a new world, yet it is the same world. In brief, Mystic cosmogony may be considered as setting forth the birth of a man's own true world at his initiation from the small into that which is the great, his passing from the lesser mysteries of generation into the greater mystery of regeneration, from man to Superman, and thence to Christ. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.